today we're going to talk about brand voice. So good copy takes into account the voice behind it. So what words would you use? What words would you never use? Consistency in your brand voice builds trust. So quite often I hear business owners say that they find it very easy to articulate their brand personality or how they want to come across in person, but actually when it comes to writing it, it sounds very different. If you sound one way on Zoom and then your written voice is different, it will come across as inauthentic and confusing. And then people are put off from converting if they are seeing inconsistency and they feel a bit confused. So if they're on your website and they've seen you on, say, an Instagram live video and you're talking one way, they hit your website and it's a very different tone of voice, it can be a real conversion killer. So it's really important to consider brand voice when you're thinking about the science behind copy that converts. And the great thing about it is there is science behind brand voice, quite great science. So I'm going to talk to you about that today. The first point about brand voice is if you are struggling to find your brand personality or your brand voice, you can look to psychologist Carl Jung. So he identified 12 archetypes, and these are personalities or personality traits that people fit into, and identified that there are 12 archetypes of personality traits that we all fit into. It's not to say we are only one archetype, we can be a mixture of a few, but you can use this as a really great solid baseline to try and find your brand personality. And you can just Google Carl Jung, personality archetypes or brand archetypes Carl Jung, and you'll find a lot of information on that. The great thing about it is that it helps you not have to start from scratch. So people have put together what your tone of voice should sound like, what words you should use if you're a certain archetype. If you are a personal brand or a one-on-one service provider where you are directly dealing with your clients, then pick an archetype that's most similar to you and how you want to come across. If you're slightly bigger, you have other people working for you, and you kind of want a brand that's more kind of reflective of the whole business, then you might pick one that aligns more with what you do or the service you provide. So that's totally up to you, whichever one aligns to you. And there are actually quizzes out there you can take as well to identify your brand archetype. So that would be my first tip. The science behind brand voice, actually use Carl Jung's archetypes to help you define how you should sound. The next thing about brand voice is almost like an anti-science rule. So lots of business owners struggle with writing for their business because when we're writing marketing copy, we need to write in a way that forms an emotional connection. We need to write in a conversational manner, and that is not how we're taught to write at school. At school, we're taught to write academically, we're taught to write professionally, we're taught to write in certain grammatical structures, and those don't apply. So for example, I've just started this sentence with so. If you're at school, you're taught not to start sentences with so, with and, with because. But when you're talking conversationally, you 100% can and you should, because that's how you create more conversation in your copy. It's how you form an emotional connection with your reader. So grammar rules you learn at school don't always apply. And what the third way you can use science to determine your brand voice is to understand the data behind the way you speak. And a really simple way of doing that is just to say everything you've written out loud. If you've written a social media post, for example, or a piece of web copy, read it out loud. If there's a word that jars, if there's a word that you're like, I would never say that, then change it. If you speak very directly, take out your adjectives. If you speak very quickly, maybe you can use punctuation to kind of reflect the rapidness of how you speak. So there's lots of ways that you can reflect how you speak in your writing, but the best way to learn what that might be is to speak things out loud and kind of use the data behind it. There are also some tools and software you can use. So the Hemingway app, for example, can give you some really good insight into how you write. It can help you cut words out. Hemingway was very famous for writing very succinctly, so the app is very good at helping you cut down your words. There's another one called Analyze My Writing, where you can put in a piece of writing that you've written and it'll tell you your average sentence length, your average comma per 100 words, all this data, which is really good to know because then you can make sure you're being consistent across everything. Also, if you're outsourcing, you can make sure that you're being consistent, telling your copywriter how you speak, and then you can make sure your voice is consistent whoever's writing it. So those are some really great tips for the science behind brand voice. So use Brand Archetypes by Carl Jung. The grammar rules you learn at school don't always apply, and understand the data behind the way you speak by speaking things out loud and using some tips and software. So that's the end of our trip into the science behind copy that converts. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you're interested in really kind of powering up your website and you want to take this further, take your learnings further, I am holding my website words workshop very soon. You'll find information in the email about that, and I would love to see you there. Thank you.